granniopteryx, she knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. I'm sorry about the fan noise, if there is a fan noise in the background. I've got it on full blast. It's sort of turned warm again, hasn't it? Right, well, most of you watching this video will be aware of this. Watch this space. It's a government proposal on the control of the internet. Although, of course, they don't put it quite that way. The opening part of the consultation document shows a middle-class family of impeccable ethnic variability. There's this fellow here. Well, we're not exactly sure what he is, are we? And this lady here looks particularly, well, probably Jamaican of some sort, but not too dark, not too dark. Anyway, so that's the way they put it. And then here's a little old lady on her phone, and obviously a student in some very nice student diggings, which I don't think is the usual. Well, it wasn't when I was a student anyway. And yeah, here's a television studio, just to remind you of where they are. Okay, so most of you are pretty well aware of this. Well, all of you who have regular access to the blogosphere, you will have heard of this. Actually, I should think you are one of quite a small proportion of the British public who know about it, because I'm pretty certain that most don't. But we'll get to that in a minute. Now let's see this. It starts off with this. Television is unique. In the UK, to broadcast a channel, you generally need a license which requires you to be a fit and proper person. Which already starts with the idea that fit and proper people are the only ones who should have access to mass media. The content broadcast must meet specific standards, including protecting younger audiences from harm, and due accuracy and impartiality for news, which is overseen by the independent regulator Ofcom. This takes it for granted that this has to be the case. You know, it doesn't say, why is there Ofcom in the first place? Why is there a regulator? These are questions that we should be asking, but they just take it for granted that that's the way life is. And I like the way they say you've got to protect younger audiences from harm. As if they're saying that young brains are susceptible and naive. And it's young brains they are trying to give the vote to in the next elections. Interesting, isn't it? And due accuracy and impartiality for news, which is overseen by the independent regulator Ofcom. Television also benefits from public funding and support through the licence fee, tax incentives and infrastructure. I don't see what that has to do with anything. I don't get public funding or support through any licence fee or a tax incentive, and the only infrastructure I have is what I've managed to buy for myself, mostly through Amazon. So I don't see what that has to do with this, really. Anyway, it carries on with a long essay on the changing role of TV and media in general. And it's actually got nothing to do with the matter in hand. The matter in hand being the government saying that some platforms should have priority over other platforms, and these platforms with the priority are decided on by the government. I mean, they may say by the independent authority Ofcom. Yeah, right, like Ofcom really is independent. Like they don't meet each other for drinks and dinner parties and Wimbledon every so often and that sort of thing. No, that never happens. One group will have nothing to do with the other, ever. Yeah? Okay. And the prioritised ones are, of course, media like the BBC, Channel 4 and ITV, which this document somewhere here describes as trusted. And again, I have to say, well, yeah, trusted by whom? So let's read this. However, most, if not all, of these algorithms are designed to prioritize content that keeps users on a platform. So what they're saying is, they're talking about things like YouTube or Rumble or whatever else there is. The content is supposed to keep people on YouTube or Rumble or whatever. Like the BBC aren't interested in keeping watchers watching? Of course they are. And they say that content that triggers strong emotional responses. That's what most of these platforms do. I will at this point bring in the subject of a show called How to Survive a War Zone. Here we are. It was made by the BBC and it was supposed to look like a standard documentary, but in fact it was deliberately calculated to play on the emotions of the viewer, and it turns out that the stars of the show, including, or well, specifically the children actually, were closely linked to Hamas. It would be a bit like the BBC making a show during World War II about daily life in Japan as told by a middle-class kid, who had to run away from American bombing and whose family was suffering hardship because the rice rations were being interrupted. And then it turned out that this kid was the Emperor Hirohito's nephew, and the photogenic man described as his father actually turned out to be the commander of the Japanese Navy and not related to the kid at all. Now, you see, if that were a one-off, I'd probably not have gone into it in such detail, but it was by no means the only one, or even the worst of the BBC's failings. And this is what that government document describes as trusted. The British broadcasters formally apologised at least 12 times for meaningful editorial blunders since October the 7th. And the most recent of these apologies was made last week in relation to Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone, which was removed from iPlayer after a string of concerns was raised about the documentary, including that its main subject was not declared as being the son of a Hamas minister. So yes, that's one example of something the government regards as trustworthy. It had actually to be taken down. It was such a lie from beginning to end. However, anything made by Tommy Robinson, for instance, would be instantly categorised as lies and forced down to the bottom of the algorithmic list. So let's read that again. Some outputs by non-trusted providers are designed to prioritise content that keeps users on a platform, triggering a strong emotional response, encouraging engagement over accuracy, and designed to show viewers more of what they know they like. Pardon? That's bad. so they're less likely to expose audiences to content that challenges their existing views. That's not the purpose of the BBC. The purpose of the BBC, for instance, is to make programmes that show as near as they can the truth, and they don't do that. Now, I don't think that anyone watching my channel regularly thinks the BBC or ITV or Channel 4 are actually trustworthy in any way. Also, you lot, people who watch my channel tend to be, by the looks of things, an engaged sort of person, aware of what's going on and very clear about the problems of broadcasting. In other words, you are a specific group. You're internet savvy. And if you go through this and object to various things in the questionnaire that comes right at the bottom somewhere, you're the sort of person who is probably politically sceptical. You're not the sort to crash out every night in front of some flickering, mindless junk. And I'm sorry to have to tell you that, but that's probably what 85% of our country do. Look, and I'm not blaming them for that, because you've got a life to live, you have work to do, you have family problems, you have money problems. With this government, you have a lot more money problems than you probably would have had at any other time. When you've finished your day, you just want to collapse on the sofa and veg out, a lot of you. And people can't be blamed for that, but of course you're going to miss a lot of information that way. And I'd guess that's about 85% of the adult population of this country. I shouldn't think that many more than 80% have actually even heard of this consultation document, for all that it shows what they seem to regard as an everyman type of family there. No, you know more about it, and so that makes you probably different. So, when you hear about something like this, what are you going to do? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to access the website, look at the questions, and you might even then go to the bottom. There is an optional section of personal questions. Here we are. About you. You might very well answer this. Your name, it's all optional, it says here. Your email address. Are you an individual or an organisation? May we publish your response? They ask your gender, and they give you a list: man, woman, non-binary, prefer not to say, or, there's a text box to self-describe. Is the gender you identify with the same as your sex registered at birth? Now, these questions are sort of interesting because they give a pretty clear idea of what sort of person you are. Indeed, what your voting patterns are most likely to be. And that's interesting. It means, without asking you what political opinions you have, they have just asked you what your political opinions are. What's your ethnic group? So they're trying to triangulate on that. Do you have a disability or long-term health condition? Again, they are trying to find out more about you, and they're taking a sort of test of internet savvy people who are disabled. This is all good for targeting various people. And which region of the UK do you live in? So by the time you've finished answering these questions, it's not that just that the government has a pretty good idea of your opinions, of the idea of the government setting what you can, or what you and your fellow internet users can actually get to see on the internet, but they also have a pretty good profile not only of your opinions, but your political sympathies, and therefore of your voting, your likely voting intentions and social ambitions. So I'd say this whole situation here is something of a win-win for the government, because either you will refuse to fill in the consultation and so they can say what they like, or you fill it in and they have a pretty good profile of your personality. Well, what to do? That's a good question, isn't it? Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.